Hello, and welcome to Exterior Wood Stain Considerations. My name is Chris Buffalo. I'll be your host for this course. The significance of texture, VOC laws, penetration and cleanup, and especially maintenance costs associated with semi-transparent and transparent wood stain selection became an important webinar when on my basics webinar for wood specification, the architects asked me to expand on the stain use, and I started to do it for a section of that webinar, and it blew into an entire webinar of itself. So that is what the purpose of this class is. I'm going to delve into some things that I don't think a lot of people know about and expose a little bit of the underbelly of the manufacturing side of things so that at the design level, you guys can make some educated decisions. All right, Buffalo Lumber is a registered provider with the AIA, and you get an HSWCES credit upon completion of this course for AIA members. A certificate of completion is available for non-AIA members upon request. And as usual, the AIA does not endorse any product method or detail that we cover in this class. Exterior woods considerations, you have 1 year from accreditation to get your MCE information. And this course is copyrighted by Buffalo Lumber. All right, so let's dive in. So I did this in order of importance, even though the top two are 50-50. So the significance of wood texture in stain selection is that it's the most important determiner of the lifespan of your stain. The VOC law change in 2012, that was a game changer. I mean, in 2012, they changed the law that said how much oil you could put in a stain. And basically, you can take everything you thought you knew about stain before 2012 and tear it up and throw it out the window. Of this recording is 2019, and we have about a 7-year window to measure the performance of stains. Because of that law, we see a lot of film forming finishes entering the marketplace, so we want you to gain a lot of clarity on the difference between film forming and penetrating finishes. And then, due to that research, I want you to understand the maintenance cost implications between film forming and penetrating finishes, and more specifically, the $100,000 navigation question that you're going to need while making stain selections. So I want to go into our approach as where we're coming from. All right. So in 2012, we started getting a lot of calls, and I'll go into that story in a minute. But because of that, people would call us up almost apologetically. Hey, you know what? I know we're not going to buy wood from you, but I just don't know where to turn. I need to talk to somebody. And so they were experiencing failures. And so I had my assistant. I was like, well, you know, I feel for these people. So set aside Thursdays. I'll call my Dear Abby calls. And so I started helping people with wood problems. And in the course of helping people with wood problems, I started to discover all of the things I'm about to talk to you about in this webinar. And I discovered something else in that when something fails, it causes everybody to run for cover, and nobody ever involved in the project ever wants to use wood again. And when it succeeds, everybody in the project says wood is the greatest thing in the world, and they totally want to use it again. So we go directly at some difficult truths of wood ownership. Some of these truths may indeed scare some people off of using wood because of the true challenges that you face. However, it's my belief that people who would run off because they are exposed to true challenges should not do wood. And people who are going to do wood because they love it so much that they're going to do it anyway should absolutely know these challenges. So our entire intent of these webinars is to hit that truth so hard and so directly that you know whether or not you want to do wood. All right. So this slide is an actual case study in progress. This is what I call a cutting edge design challenge. This is a new style of design. It has had an issue. We've got a big issue, okay? And in this letter to the architect, this homeowner clearly expects the architects to have done this due diligence on how this stain is going to perform, how this method is going to look. And she feels it's directly quoted, a ball in your court. And our goal of this course is to make sure this doesn't happen to you. All right, now this is a weird challenge. All right, this is the one, the letter she sent me, another one where, I'm just helping them out. Now I'm turning these into case studies and turning these case studies into courses for you guys. All right, this is a weird one though, and everybody she's talking to won't give her any answers. I mean, one of the problems when you have a failure is everybody runs for cover. Nobody wants to go backwards. Nobody really wants to deal with it. You're going to have butt covering going on. So this is the ideal customer for a lot of the people who may take this course. High-end residential homeowner, definitely had the money, loved the wood look. And when it went bad, she was heartbroken. So what is a love affair? I covered that in the last webinar. And when your heart is broken, love turns to hate real quick. So angry at everybody. But at the end of the day, if a stain fails, the stain company is only responsible for the stain cost. So if you spent $40,000 on your wood and $2,000 on your stain and the stain fails, here's your $2,000. At the end of the day, the customer pays for the cleanup, the restoration, the lessons learned the hard way, the stain company's less than forthcomingness, you might call it, and the challenges that continue. Okay. Now, this is also a new thing. I guess new to the States or new to me. I've only seen it the last couple years where they have a slat in an actual space and a slat in a space where the elements can come through these areas and actually hit the wall behind it. Okay. And they call this a rain screen, and we're going to get into rain screen. Can be called a furring system, strips that are behind the wood we call rain screen. This type of look is called a rain screen. The louvered system can be called rain screen. In this case, we're talking about slat space slat. Okay. Now, interesting to note in this failure, everywhere they had an overhang, there was no issue originally, and everywhere they did have an overhang had an issue almost immediately. When I sent this out to my experts, they were like, why is the stud wall showing through here? I've never seen this before. Why is the outline of the roof showing through the issue? I've never seen that before. I had one of my stain guys asking me so many questions and saying, well, I need to run this test and I need to run that test. I'm like, this is a lady owning a house in Vermont on a lake, dude. I can't, there's no way we can run all these tests. I have to get out there and figure it out. I mean, there's more questions than answers at this point. So here we can see closer this issue where we've got the slat space slat. So this is it's a 2x2 furring strip over the house wrap, and air and water can flow on all these sides. This is part of the wall that had the issue. This is part that did not. This area had an overhang. This area did not. And the issue literally split down the corner of the wall. Another weird thing about that, okay? Now, because this issue is showing itself on the top, we're not sure if it's on the back yet, okay? So her concern right here that I've highlighted, whether it's on the back and whether that poses a health risk, very legitimate concern. So where we are in this is that my opinion is, it's a design challenge, a finish challenge, and an install challenge. Currently, I'm not in favor of this where they're actually letting the weather hit the wall, but I don't know yet because I haven't seen the entirety of this failure. We haven't followed up on it completely yet. I can say that we can achieve a look similar to this with patterns that do not expose the wall, although I don't know that had anything to do with this failure, okay? So really, not sure on that. This would be a place where we would ask our question of, should I go out into the field and follow up on this? I mean, our approach for our architect presentations is we're going to examine failure so that we can map a path to success, and figuring out what happened here, and not only that, but figuring out what this lady's going to have to do to fix it, and following up on the remediation is something that we're going to do as a case study. And so my first quiz question would have been, do we have a purpose? Are you guys interested in seeing what happened here? All right, so at the end of the webinar, since this is the live one, you can send us some feedback. Let me know, because we're contemplating going out personally, because no one else, I can't get anybody else to do the test. You can't get a painter really out there. So we're contemplating going out ourselves and doing this case study, helping them out, and reporting back with a full report to you guys. All right, now we're going to dive into texture. So texture is the most important decision you're going to make on the project. And the reason that texture is the most important decision on the project is because I receive so much resistance from the design community to use the rough face. All right. And the reason that we are so resistant on the smooth face is the challenges that we have. Like at the manufacturer level, especially since 2012, we just cannot get a stain to penetrate or perform on the smooth face. I mean, even the best technology, it's very difficult to do the prep to get a stain to penetrate with any degree of success on the smooth face. And because of that, it's extremely difficult to educate people enough to understand what it's really going to take to care for the smooth face properly. Now, the reason the entire design community wants a smooth face is because it's gorgeous. If the prep's done correctly, it looks awesome when it's installed. All right, this is a picture of freshly installed smooth face. I mean, it is gorgeous. I don't deny that. To keep it looking gorgeous, you're gonna have to go around and inspect it every 6 months. You're gonna have to be that guy that loves to wash his car. Plan on and budget for cleaning it every year. All right. Plan on and budget for, depending on exposure, maintaining it every year, at least every 2 years. If you're going to project smooth face, natural wood look, transparent or semi-transparent stain, it is not realistic to budget more than 2 years life out of the stain on the smooth face, unless you take some other considerations. Okay. We're not going to go into that. We're talking about basic stain expectations at this point. All right, so the reason you have to care for the smooth face, because of the lack of penetration, it goes bad quick. All right, a 2-hour, $100 job this year can easily be a 2-week, $2,000 job next year. All right, and when you go from small cleanup, spot cleanup with a regular cleaning agent to full restoration with strippers, you're talking about a major increase in labor and costs. Okay, so if you do it as it needs to do it, it's very easy. And this webinar is to put it in your mind what to factor in ahead of time so that your customers know what to expect. So the tender love and care, it's our firm belief that only people who love wood enough to take care of it should use wood, and those people who don't want to take care of wood shouldn't use wood. Or if you're going to do it for no maintenance, and we can get into that, you prep it exactly right and know what to expect. You can do it with no maintenance. Just be ready for it to turn gray and black. If you want to keep it looking wood, beautiful and natural, you're going to want to wash it down once a year. All right, wash it down like a car. Use oxygen bleach. That's how we do it. Figure a sprayer and a brush application method. You just put that oxygen bleach on there, kind of brush it in, let it sit 20 minutes or 15 minutes, do its job, rinse it off. Typically, that's all you're going to have to do again. If you are a do-it-yourselfer, the thing is to remember, rinse, 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 rinse. So anything you put on that wall, rinse it off very, very well. All right, so the cost of looking pretty, depending on who does the work. So everything that we're talking about here can be done by a do-it-yourselfer. All right, but a lot of people at the case study just we talked about, the Cutting Edge Design Challenge, she's not going to want to do that personally, right? So we got to kind of cover some costs. Now, our cost estimates are not to have you consider this is what your cost estimates are for. These are for you to consider the differences between the applications. All right, we used a baseline for a stain and seal expert in Nashville. Thank you, stain and seal experts in Nashville. And that's costs that are in Nashville. These cost projections are meant for you to consider as far as how you should budget. You should contact a local paint company and make sure they have wood experience. Some paint companies have no wood experience and they damage wood. So make sure you're talking about people who know what they're talking about. All right. So with those cost projections, we're talking about cleanup now. For just the washing the car oxygen bleach, figure 160 to $3 a square foot. So per 1,000 square feet every year, figure 1,600 to 3,000 bucks for cleanup. All right, so the smooth face conundrum goes further than. Wow, sorry about that. Okay, so those slides covered if it was done exactly correctly. Now we're going to pull the pants down on the manufacturing side of things a little bit, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges that we're having. I talk about the mill glaze debate because it cracks me up. I'm a wood expert. I'm grandfathered in. I'm third generation wood guy. I've been specializing in wood siding for the last 15 years. I've done thousands of consultations, and I cannot tell you at this stage of the game whether mill glaze even exists. I was more confused after talking to the experts about it than I was going in. And the reason I am talking about mill glaze is because apparently even the experts are not sure if it exists. This is actually a PDF from Mark Naby of Forest Products Laboratories, probably the world's foremost expert on wood finishes. And he says, we haven't been able to duplicate mill glaze at the lab. It's not saying it doesn't exist. We're just saying we've tried all these different ways to replicate mill glaze, and we cannot reproduce it at the laboratory level. You'd be saying, well, Chris, why are we talking about mill glaze so much? And I'll say that, well, mill glaze, near as I can tell, is the excuse they use when finishes fail on the smooth face. And mill glaze is quite frequently attributed to things that are not due to mill glaze. I'll say we're going to cover some of that, okay? Grain separation. Now, this is an oil-based stain. They did not sand it before they put the stain on there, okay? This is a younger tree. You see that I covered the grain rings in the other webinar. You can see the distance between this grain ring, okay? And we didn't get any penetration because they weren't able to sand the wood. This is not the stain peeling off. This is actually the grain of the wood separating here where the stain was on the wood. This is where the stain penetrated to. You can see it's less than a millimeter. There's no penetration there. And the grain just peeled up. Now, this in and of itself is not a major problem. You can sand this and spot check it. This is actually a wall that was getting hit by the sun all day long. But grain separation is a problem that is often attributed to mill glaze. It's often a problem of a finish failure that we see in the field. And it's something that is going to become more prevalent as we see younger trees entering the marketplace. All right, so our grain separation, because we're on grain rates. This is another issue that's actually caused by waterborne finishes. And this is grain raise. Another issue, I apologize for confusion in terms. This is grain separation. This is grain raise. So this is caused because we milled this smooth. We put a planer knife on it and we suppress those wood fibers down. And then we applied a water-based finish to the top of here, and some of these fibers jumped back up. On about 30% of the load, we had grain raise. And a lot of times people say grain raise is mill glaze, but it's the raising of the grain. And because it only happened on 30% of the load, I couldn't tell you why it happened. I mean, we know it was related to the water-based stain. We had to bring that wood back, that 30%, sand it, wet it, sand it again, and then apply the stain, and then we didn't have that problem. So what we're seeing is smooth face and waterborne finishes presenting new challenges that we had not experienced before, making us scratch our heads, go, what are we doing? What do we do? The other problem with the stain not penetrating the smooth face, let's say you're a homeowner, you see it that first year and you see a little darkening up here and you say, well, I don't know if I want to do anything about that. The problem is because it doesn't penetrate, we don't get a lot of pigment. That year that you wait, the wood can turn prematurely gray underneath the pigment of the stain. So it can lighten the wood behind the stain. So it starts to look faded within the first year. And by the second year, you absolutely have to do cleanup on it, right? So premature graying, another challenge of the smooth face. The third challenge, smooth face, the prep and the fact that we're using film forming finishes, they need different applications. This one was me learning the hard way that smooth faced, these stains needed a different 2-coat application, not a 1-coat. This was actually the water bouncing down off the tank, splashing back onto the finish, wore the finish out, and turned the wood black. So a lot of the smooth face failures that we look at are preparation related. I mean, 99% of your wood failures are installation or preparation related. All right. Now, that lets it, well, what is good preparation? If you're going to do the smooth face, you have to sand it before you stain it, and you have to use an 80 grit. If you use a 100 grit, excuse me. If you use a 100 grit, you could close that grain and it won't want to take a stain. So an 80 grit will open it up enough to take a stain. You're going to want to do the sanding in a perfect sanding environment that allows you to remove any debris caused by the sanding so you don't create, quote, mill glaze. And you're going to want to be able to remove all the debris as you're sanded. When you sand with an 80 grit sandpaper and you cause the grain to raise enough to soak in the stain but still be smooth to the touch, because that's what we're talking about here, smooth face, right? We're going to sand it with an 80 grit, so it's going to make the fibers of the grain stand up and look up and enough to soak in as much stain as we can, but still remain smooth to the touch. Those grains are only going to stand up for a certain amount of time. So you're going to have to apply that stain while they're still standing. If you wait too long and they lay back down, it's not going to want to get maximum penetration. And maximum penetration is what achieves your lifespan of the stain. So that is proper preparation right there. Now, at the manufacturer level, we're seeing some challenges, okay? Because the new stains entering the market don't penetrate on their own. Used to be we could get away with not having to sand the smooth face because the stains would penetrate anyway, but they don't anymore. And so some of your pre-finishers are saying, we're not going to do it. Forget it. I'm not doing it anymore. Some of those stain guys are going, look, we'll do the smooth face, but I'm not taking responsibility for the fact that it sucks. It won't penetrate. We're not seeing any good results. We're not, not good, but we'll do it as long as you write off that it's not our problem if it screws up. Some of them are saying, you know what, we're not getting a good enough. It takes too long to dry. So as it comes off the machine, we're going to hand wipe it. And we're going to make that application more even, but it also, if you haven't sanded that face, it actually makes it thinner coat. So it's more even, but it's not going to last any longer. And then you have the perfect storm of pre-sanding it, machine coating it, removing the excess stain, and monitoring the film thickness as it's applied. So as you can imagine, with all of the different ways of quoting and the different manufacturing methods, 8 out of 10 times, you're not getting that perfect storm of sanding and machine coating where the machine coaters get willing to remove the excess stain or the thickness and monitor the film and do all that. And a lot of times that extra prep prices the stuff out of what they bid it originally. So you have to value engineer proper preparation out of the equation. The problem with that is it creates a tremendous amount of confusion, okay? We're seeing, especially since 2012, especially since people are not used to having to prep it as much, okay? Again, before 2012, we could almost get away with murder because using high penetration oil-based stains will penetrate an unsanded face enough to where, hey, it's going to work 80% of the time. The 20% it doesn't, you just refinish. It's not a big deal. But now there's a whole lot of ways it can go wrong. And exactly right is changing. And since it's 99% preparation, and what I'm seeing in the market now is like, I'm 53. Now, I was grandfathered in. My grandfather's a wood guy. My dad's a wood guy. I'm a wood guy. The guys who know how to do wood, who were used to using wood 20 years ago, because in the last 20 years, wood has not been a real commodity siding product. All right. So the guys that knew how to work wood are moving out of the market, and the guys coming up don't have the experience, don't have the training. And a lot of them are too busy to, realize wood's completely different and you have to bid it different. You have to take time to do it. So there's a lot of ways that, it can be challenging. So, and we want to cover that since a lot of them do it wrong. And you're going to have to spec this to guys that are going to have to put it out to bid to 3 guys and 3 guys and 3 guys. The formula for fixing it, if you're going to have to use the smooth face, and this is what we tell a lot of our customers, because not all of our mills can sand the smooth face either. It's not always realistic at the price or the production level. You say, look, at the manufacturer level, I can still use the old penetrating oil-based stains. We can do it on a smooth face that hasn't been sanded. You get the benefit of the factory finish, which is sealing all 6 sides of every board before it's put up. You get the full benefit of the factory finish, which seals all 6 sides of the board at the manufacturer level. The stain can penetrate the smooth face, so then you install it. And then figure on the first year, the first 6 months, first year. If you're lucky, you get 2 years. You got to come back and redo it the right way. Okay, if we get an oil-based penetrating first coat on there, semi-transparent or even a transparent, then in the field you can specify, have a painter come out, sand it, and then put an oil-based penetrating stain that you can actually get aftermarket at the non-manufacturing level. And that's a challenge we can talk about as well. So that's how you would compensate in the spec. You would say, hey, we want to use smooth face, we want to use a 550 VOC stain at the manufacturing level from Olympic, say. And then we want to specify that a painter come back within a year or 2, depending on how the stain is performing, and clean it, sand it, and then apply a penetrating oil-based stain that can be bought in the local marketplace. All right, so that's how you would compensate in the spec. The other way to compensate is the rough face, and the rough face solution eliminates the smooth face conundrum. All right, we don't have any problem getting a stain to penetrate because we're texturing the face. The grain stands up enough for you to touch it. There is no grain separation. There will be no grain raise. There will be no failures blamed on mill glaze. Your stain will last at least double, if not triple or quadruple the time. We don't have to worry about guys handling it and leaving a fingerprint on it. It basically idiot proofs it at the manufacturing level and to some degree at the installation level. So you've got at least half the cost, half the risk, half the hassle, and twice the reward. And we always ask our design community, and I hit this point very hard, is the difference between this rough and this smooth really worth that much money and that much risk and that much hassle? Okay, now I'm not trying to dissuade you. I'm just telling you that if you specify smooth face and you put your customers in a situation where they're not really ready to maintain it and it goes ugly, everybody's going to be angry with everybody. So I would rather have you know now, see the challenges that we are, and have them directly either plan for them or plan not to do it. Okay, now we're going to dive into the game changer. In 2012, they passed a law that changed the game, all right? Now, how I found out about this was 2010, I wrote an article. We had a customer call in, owned wood for 30 years, and said he got tired of cleaning it all the time because it turned black. So I wrote an article, how to clean your wood if it turns black, and we would get 2 or 3 calls a year on it. It was no big deal. In 2012, I started getting 20 to 50 calls a year, and people were in severe distress, all right? So I started going, what is going on? And so I started looking into it deeply, all right? And what we found out was that manufacturers, when the law changed in 2012, the EPA did not pass a national law. They passed a law that says the states have the right to say. So each state adopted the VOC law at a different level. Some of them said it all used to be 550 was allowable. 550 is a good oil-based penetrating stain. Now, some of the states like California are saying it can't be more than 250. Some of them are saying 3. Some of them are saying 150. I think California's at 150. So it because the states adopting them at different levels, because of the manufacturers not being sure what goes where and how to do it, they just came out with a bunch of stuff, didn't really tell anybody, and there's been a ton of failures. This lady was how I found out that one of the companies had changed their formula without really telling anybody. She had bought Redwood in 2008. She had maintained her deck every couple years with the same product, and she had applied it the same way. And she said after 2012, she went into the same store, to the same section of the store, same shelf, bought a can that looked the same label, same coloring, same name of the stain. Went home and applied it the same way she'd always applied it for years, and 6 months later, she got mushrooms growing out of her deck, right? And so we do the calling on this, and we call the manufacturer, and they say, well, she completely applied it the wrong way. And we're like, well, why? What do you mean? What are you talking about? She's been using this stain for years. Oh, well, they changed the formulation. Like, really? What do you mean they changed the formulation? Well, yeah, they changed it to a water-based, waterborne formulation. They changed it, which completely changed the way you need to apply the stain. And the only indication of that was a postage stamp application instruction on the can itself. And by the time she had used it for 6 years in a row, she didn't know. Yep, never even paid attention to the can, just went ahead and did it. And now she's got a major restoration of her deck to do. Okay. This one was me. This was my screw up. Okay. I've been specifying a certain product for years. They changed one part of the name, and I had been specifying one code of the oil-based version of this product for years. It was no big deal. This customer actually named the color that they wanted and said, did it need a 2-coat? And I was like, no, it totally doesn't need a 2-coat, because I had been using it for years, since before 2012. Well, sure enough, they changed the formula. That one word change meant the change from an oil to a film forming, which now required a 2-coat finish. Long story short, it failed after a year and a half, and it was completely my fault. This is a splashback issue. This is where the wood turned dark as the finish wore off. There were some drainage issues too, but this wood prematurely failed 100% because I screwed up and didn't read the instructions, right? And because of that, I went out there and learned firsthand what strippers are working with strippers are like. Now, the good news is this is the same splashback issue. That wood will come back, all right? I went out there, and with the homeowners, we gloved up, rubber gloves, aprons, goggles, mask, rope off, tape off the vegetation, hide the women and children and animals, and get ready for some serious hazardous chemicals out there. And it took 3 of us 8 man-hours more to scrub strippers into that entire wall. Now, we didn't do the entire restoration process that like a wood restorer would do, because it didn't require that. The problem hadn't gone that long. She called me on it way early enough to where 1 coat of strippers did it. But that was a gnarly job, man. That's no joke. Strippers are no joke. That is hazardous material management at its finest, okay? And if you screw up and you got to use strippers rather than just cleaning with oxygen bleach, you just doubled your labor costs, and I'll cover that in a little while. All right, so when we started calling the tech departments, we said, hey, what is going on? And the ones who changed their can without letting anybody know said, well, oils are just going away. The EPA changed the law. We don't know which state is what, so we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to create stains that don't have oils in them, all right? And so I called Mark Naby again, because he's the world's foremost expert on wood finishes. And I said, what is this? What's up with this, VOC law? And he's like, well, the problems with waterborne finishes is that because they don't penetrate, it's basically like a real super thin paint. So you experience all the risks and trouble of paint, and you're talking about a much thinner coating, all right? And so when I talked to a very known factory application expert about waterborne finishes, and he tells me, well, there's just not a lot of room for error with the application. So you have to apply it exactly the way their instructions say, or it's going to be a problem. All right. So here you go from stains that have been used the same way for years, an expectation even I got caught on, and that they change an application so extreme the change in application between oil-based and film forming is so extreme that it should be highlighted with a giant warning sign, and nobody knows anything about it. All right, so that is what has been causing all of these failures. Number one reason for the failures is this VOC law change. Manufacturers changing their formulations without a sufficient warning system for the people who had been using their stains for years. And those people went in with the wrong application, which, by the way, the manufacturers covered their butt on with the postage stamp application instructions. Now they don't even have to refund cost of the stain, right? It's just ridiculous. It's because the one with the mushrooms, they said, well, she didn't apply it properly, and so she had no claim, even though they had changed the formulation, didn't say anything to anybody, changed the postage stamp size application method. There was no cause for her. All right, because of the VOC law change and the scramble to figure out how to create stains that work without using oils, I call it the Bourne-based shuffle. As I delved into this, I became more and more confused by the terminology waterborne, oil-borne, water-based, oil-based, solvent-borne, solvent-based. I had started to wonder what everybody was talking about. And in my pea brain, I have to break things down the simplest possible way. So for the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to talk in simplistic terms because there's a lot of vernacular being used. So base is the particles that protect the wood. All right, they can be synthetic resins, they can be a lot of different things, but they're the base, oil, water, whatever. The base are the particles that protect the wood. Borne is the vehicle that transports the particles that are going to protect the wood. So the school bus is the base, or excuse me, the borne, and the people inside the school bus is the base. All right. And that's the basics of the science that we're going to be talking about. And that's what I keep in mind because, again, as I go through the confusing vernacular, I need a guidepost to have my pea brain keep in contact with the subject matter, right? All right, so what we see is oil penetrates water forms of film. Oil products create maximum penetration. Waterborne products are still kind of either working or not. They're more prone to peeling in issues like this. We don't see this with oil-based stains. This is a water-based finish issue primarily, okay? So since 2012, manufacturers have hit the laboratory. Some of them copped out and just threw some water into the formula and say, hey, here you go. We made the formula. Some of them actually trying to hit penetration, okay? And some of them are achieving a little bit of both. So what we're seeing is a lot of vernacular. You're going to see, like I was talking about, solvent-borne, water-based, solvent hybrid, alkyd emulsion, synthetic resins, acrylics. It becomes mind-boggling because every manufacturer will write a 40-page dissertation on their technology, and by the time you're done reading it, you have no idea what they're talking about. I lost my place 10 times. You know, I could not figure out a divining rod to get through all of this, okay? And the manufacturers are, you know, coming up with ways to try and keep selling their stain. So my divining rod is penetration, all right? As the technologies improve, they improve, in my estimation as a wood expert, improvements in technology equal improvements in penetration, all right? I don't see film forming finishes as a good thing. I see technological improvements to create maximum penetration as the best thing, okay? So our results are still coming back in. Our conclusions are quite simply oil is better than water, but oil is getting harder to find. There are some ways to find it. Some of the smaller guys are figuring out ways to use non-petroleum oil-based products. There's some new technologies emerging in the marketplace. So our conclusions are penetration is what you look for. Penetration is the divining rod to guide you through the confusing vernacular, the confusing terrain, and the fact that we do not know how stains are performing past, 9 years or 7 years. All right. The penetrating versus film forming debate. Now, we like penetration for a lot of reasons. Penetrating oil-based stains will pass all the way through the wood and into the fibers and cellular structure. At the cellular level, the particles of oil will bond with the wood cells. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when oil goes into wood, as the wood cells, when you take wood out of the tree and turn it into a stick and put it on a wall, it's going to want to go through cellular degradation, okay? Cellular degradation. When you put an oil-based penetrating finish on there, it goes in and conditions those cells, and it keeps them live longer. It protects you from the inside out against splitting, cracking, and things like that, because it bonds to the cells. All right. As the finish is on the inside of the wood, as the wood changes sizes through ambient moisture level changes. So it gets bigger in the wet season and smaller in the dry season. The finish gets bigger and smaller right with it from the inside. So it keeps protecting the wood. Another benefit, as a penetrating particle passes through the board, it leaves very little to no residual finish once it passes through. And the most important point to understand about this is that because it penetrates so well, it does not require a wood stripper to refinish. And the importance of that will become very clear later on in the webinar. All right. Film forming finishes do not penetrate into the cell wall at all. They form a very thin wall around the wood. This is where Mark Navy was talking about a very thin paint. All right. Since they don't penetrate, they don't always, when wood expands and contracts, it doesn't always expand and contract in an even way. Okay, sometimes at a very small level, the wood is going to do this little angle, and the film forming finish is going to move away from the wood right here. This is where you see blistering, peeling, separations. Okay, this is where being a very thin paint is a problem. All right. On top of the film forming finish issue, if you don't capture the moisture content, if you're not paying attention to the moisture content of the board, you're putting the film forming finish on. If there's too much moisture in that board, you can actually trap water inside it. And if you trap water inside a wood, it's going to cause a problem even with cedars, okay? Some of the experts I sent the Modern Design Challenge to thought that might have been the problem. They might have put a film forming finish on while the moisture content was too high, and it created a blue stain mildew to actually start coming out from the inside out. So film forming finish, got to make sure the water content. All right, you're going to laugh at my little Swiss cheese here. I didn't realize it was going to look like Swiss cheese, but it's meant to illustrate a board with particles of film forming finish on it. Because it forms a film, you cannot remove it with cleaners without leaving little particles. And when you leave a particle on there, if you put another stain on it, it's going to leave little black dots everywhere. So you have to use a wood stripper to get rid of these little particles. All right, there's no other way to do it. Now here we have a film forming finish success story. This was a smooth face. We did a film forming finish on it. He got 4 years out of this, okay? And you can see he got a good 4 years. There's no mildew, there's no darkening, the color held up well. The problem came time when it was time to refinish. He got in contact with us and he said, hey, let's go to the tech department and find out, what did we use? We contacted the tech department. They said, yeah, it was a film forming finish and you have to use a stripper to get it all off there whenever you refinish. Now, this customer did not like the idea of all those chemicals around his foliage and his trees and everything. I mean, he was extremely upset about the hazardous chemicals required to clean off the film forming finish, okay? So he actually went to the expense of they cleaned it with the oxygen bleach, and then he had guys sand down his whole house and then did the research and put himself in an oil-based penetrating finish so he would not have to use wood strippers every time it came time to finish. So your customers' feelings about the hazardous materials needed in a film forming finish is also a big consideration. But the biggest consideration is the actual cost of maintenance. Again, here we're going to point out that these costs are not to be used for your own projections. These costs are made to show the differences of different approaches and give you something to consider at the design stage that a lot of people aren't considering, okay? So I know I've hit kind of scary topics, but I want to let you know, if you stay on top of it, it's really easy, okay? Cleanup costs increase substantially as the problem increases. So anything that's small is easy, anything that's bigger is hard. It's going to be interesting to note that to keep the amber natural wood tone, you're going to have to add pigment. You may as well count on a semi-transparent stain. And it's not realistic to think a semi-transparent stain is going to last more than 5 years. So at the best possible opportunity to keep the natural brown tones, every 5 years they're going to need to put a stain on there. Okay. If you want to allow the wood to go gray naturally, you can actually leave it to weather if you prep it properly and put the airspace behind and do everything you got to do. And there are some finishes out there, that will penetrate the wood and give you water protection for 10 years, but they can't say their pigments will last more than 5. So the wood will start to turn gray. You can still protect it from water penetration for 10 years, but it'll start to turn gray. All right, so when we're talking about maintenance costs, the first thing you got to talk about is using an experienced professional, somebody who's used to using wood. The number one unforeseen cost at maintenance time is somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, using a pressure washer up too high or up too close, and literally ruining wood siding. I cannot tell you how many people have called me with problems over the years where a pressure washer guy came in and ruined their wood. It's not repairable once they do that. It's ruined. Okay, so we're going to be talking about using wood professionals who know what they're talking about, at least experienced with wood. All right. Now, when we talk about strippers, there are a few caveats in all of these projections. Again, these are thinking points. The use of strippers may or may not require sanding. It's going to depend on the wood, the application, the professional. Okay, so when we say that your labor increases substantially with strippers, those labor estimates can be pro or not depending on the sanding. Sanding will increase a tremendous amount of labor. And then again, all these cost projections, all of the maintenance can be do it yourself. Okay, you don't really need a professional. What you do need to take time and make sure you read all of the application instructions on everything and do it exactly right. A lot of do-it-yourselfers are going to want to do that. All right, so with no further ado, let's dive into the cost projections. If we're talking about a rough face penetrating stain, so what we've done is we're taking 1,000 square feet picture and we're running it 10 years. Okay, so if we talk about rough face and we talk about an oil-based penetrating stain, it doesn't take very much prep. It doesn't take a whole lot to clean it up. Figure about $10 to $15 per square foot. Figure you'll have to do it 3 times in 10 years to be conservative. So figure your maintenance budget for 10 years to be, for 1,000 square feet per 10 years, to be $30,000 to $45,000. If you use a rough face film forming finish, you're going to clean it up at 3 years, refinish every 3 to 5. A stripper will be required, but you won't have to sand it. Your cost will spring between $15 and $18 a square foot. Conservatively, 3 times in 10 years, that puts you at $45,000 to $54,000 for 1,000 square feet in 10 years. If we use a smooth face penetrating stain, you're going to want to clean it annually. We covered those costs, $1,600 to $3,200. You're going to want to refinish it every 2 years on a projection basis. You might get more than that, okay? But just figure every 2 to give your people a realistic cost projection. Minimal prep for a refinish. You're not going to have to use stripping. You might do a little light sanding, might not have to do that. Depends on the condition of the wood. Figure 15 to 18 bucks a square foot. Conservatively, you will have to do it 5 times in 10 years. So you're, $75,000 to $90,000 over 10 years for that smooth face. Now we're talking the worst case scenario, obviously. The worst case would be a smooth face film forming finish. Figure, again, annual cleanup. Refinish every 1 to 2 years. Now, if the finish is done exactly right, you could get more than that. Again, we're being conservative to show comparison points. So we use the conservative estimates at the same point everywhere to show you the cost differences, all right? Strippers and sanding will be required on a smooth face film forming every single time. Your cost will go up from $18 to $27 per square foot. If you do it 5 times in 10 years, you're looking between $90,000 to $135,000 in maintenance cost projections. All right, so that is perfect storm stuff. All right, now I know I've just kind of put some people off, and maybe, I don't know where we're at with that. These are realistic, but there's a lot of stuff you can do, okay? Number 1, you can do overhangs add longevity. Anywhere water doesn't directly touch the siding, well, the siding is going to last longer. Opacity adds more lifespan. This lady here did overhangs on every wall. She did a semi-solid 2-coat. Now this, interestingly enough, this is one of my shadow profiles that I was talking about, where you get the same sight lines as the Modern Design Challenge, but you don't have exposure to the elements. All right. Now this house easily get 10 years, no problem. She used a semi-solid, and you can use a semi-solid brown colored and still get your 10 years, but you are covering up some of the natural wood aspects. So it's one of those trade-offs that people have to consider. Now, in all of our maintenance cost projection, caveats exist. Okay. There is $100,000 potential difference over 10 years based on the decisions that you make. Now, obviously, we can mitigate some of those decisions. This is a high-end, high-exposure build on the waterfront. They wanted a semi-transparent stain. They did not want to be out here anywhere near every 2 years doing this. All right, we did talk them into rough face on all of the siding, thank God. But on the trim, they didn't. They used smooth face. And so they're going to have guys out there spot checking it. But we did do a multiple coat system on that. And we are expecting an elongated lifespan, but we're not quite sure how long. Okay, this wall on the opposite side, this is the south wall, and they've got a direct water side exposure here. So I expect to maintain this far wall way more often than these other three. Okay, so this one is a case in progress. When you're doing cutting edge designs, when you're doing aggressive designs, when you're doing large exposures like this, you have to do your homework on the finished systems. Okay, you have to take into consideration the textured face. It's the only way to go on large scale commercial. I can't. We had Whole Foods Market say right in the middle of a we were in production for a whole shopping center, and they said, hey, we changed our mind, we want to do smooth face. And we said, nope, we're not going to do it. If you want to do that, you can do it yourself, and we'll send the wood unfinished and you go ahead and do it. So we stood our ground, and they did rough face. And thank God they did, because they don't want to be out maintaining that shopping center every 2 years. These guys don't want to be maintaining this monstrosity of a building every 2 years. And you, as designers, do not want to design your customers into ridiculous maintenance schedules that are going to kill their love of the wood and anyone's desire to ever do wood again. All right, so strategies for long-term success. Strategy number one, use a textured face. Use a textured face. It eliminates 80% of the risks and problems and challenges that we see. When you're designing, take concern on the south-facing wall. It's going to get pounded 24/7, at least all day, every day, all year long. It's going to get rain, snow, sleet, hail. I don't like to see giant wall wood expanses on the south side. I like to see accents, wall, trim, glass doors, that kind of stuff. If you're going to specify smooth face, specify the proper procedure, okay? Specify sanding at 80 grit and applying stain at optimal time. Specify sealing all 6 sides prior to install. Educate your customers on the maintenance decisions with the 10-year view in mind. And call the tech department and make sure of the cleanup, whether you have to use strippers or not at the time of maintenance, okay? So there are ways to ensure that you're going to have success, and the way that we do it is educating our customers like we're doing here. Okay, now again, I go back to the way to help mitigate the fact that a lot of people don't prep it properly. You can also specify, have it factory finished, put a 550 VOC oil on the smooth face, and then have a painter come back and redo it within a year. That's probably your most bulletproof in today's market, because then you can put a decent stain on there at the factory level and do some research. And when the painter comes back and uses the more expensive stain, he uses it just on the face where it's mostly needed. So that's been our best formula for success, to bulletproof a smooth face application against that propensity for not doing it correctly. Okay, so in conclusion, I have never once had to convince anybody to buy wood. Okay, as a retailer, to stay in business, especially since 2008, all I have ever had to do was make sure that whoever got the wood not shocked, didn't have any, unexpected things, liked it, didn't have it come back. So preventing failures, preventing unhappy people is more important. And in your face truths are the best way to discern the wood lover from the people who shouldn't do wood. Okay. So wood lovers are great, man. They will come through every obstacle. They're like, man, I want to know this stuff, right? I care. I love wood. I literally love wood. And it is a love affair. Someone on the project has to care. If nobody cares, you're going to be in for some problems, okay? So somebody has to care. We can provide the know, all right? If they care, they want to know, all right? And wood care, when you love it, it's not hard. It's not hard because you love it. I mean, you just keep on top of it. Anything you keep on top of is easy, all right? Anything you let go is hard. So wood is a love affair. It's a long-term relationship. And you don't go to a white woman and say, you know what, I want to marry you, but I'm going to kind of ignore you. And if you get a black spot on your leg, I'm just going to wait till it turns into gangrene before I look at it and address it. No, that's not what you do. You baby it, you pamper it, you cuddle it, you covet it. In return, it gives you, that feeling of warmth and love every time you walk up your house driveway. Every time someone beams that how much they love your house, it gives you that pride of ownership. I mean, wood gives back the love that you give it. So that is our whole point of presentation. I am here for the wood lovers. I am not here to promote wood use. I am here to help people who love wood enough to go through all these challenges, get through them, and make sure they have long-term success. So I hope you recognize the significance of texture. I hope you understand what 2012 did to the industry and how much scrambling is going on. I hope that you understand film forming and penetrating finishes well enough to navigate the confusing landscape. And I hope that we've made an impact with our maintenance and cost equations. Now, originally when I wrote this webinar, it was a $40,000 question. As I actually did the research, it is a $100,000 question. So pay attention to penetration. All right, so this concludes the webinar. Now, I say this at the end of all my webinars. Please, architects are the best researchers, especially the ones doing their own homes. Shout out to Merle Rambo, winner of the most research due diligence on a house finish ever award. Architect doing his own home. I am not the definitive answer because technology changes. So if you find a product that works, if you find something that's different than what I say, please weigh in. Let's create a path. If we find products that work, let's share the information. I will put it into future webinars. I'm going to continue to study failures, and I'm going to continue to report back to my community on what's working and what's not. And I would hope that you guys will report back as well. This is Chris Buffalo signing off. If you have any questions, please send them in, and I wish you a great day. Thank you very much.